Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing our Sima Yi's Coup Let's Talk Lore series with episode 9, titled The Gaopingling Incident. Before we get started, here is the answer to our trivia question from our previous episode, and be sure to stay tuned for a new trivia question at the end of this episode. Now, we ended last time, as we mentioned, in winter of 248, after Sima Yi claimed to be sick for over a year now. Cao Shuang decided to send his trusted advisor, Li Sheng, who had been just promoted to become the next prefect of the Jin province, to visit Sima Yi's home and check on Sima Yi's health. When Li Sheng arrived, Sima Yi tried to get up from his bed to greet Li Sheng, but he was unable to do so himself, so two maids eventually helped lift Sima Yi out of bed. They then tried to dress Sima Yi properly, but Sima Yi couldn't stand up straight or even move his arms, as his robe kept falling to the floor during the process. When they finally got the robe on Sima Yi pointed to his mouth without speaking, hinting that he was hungry. So the maids brought him congee and spoon-fed him, but even while being fed, Sima Yi seemed to have lost control of his jaws as the congee spilled all over himself. Seeing all this, Li Sheng lamented how he had heard that Sima Yi's health had been poor, but never could he imagine that it had already gotten this severe. Sima Yi faintly replied that he is not long for this world and that he is happy for Li Sheng's promotion as the Bin province prefect, and how he hoped that after his death, Li Sheng can help look after his family. Li Sheng then tried to correct Sima Yi by telling him how he had been assigned to his home province of the Jin province to become its next prefect, and not the Bin province. Sima Yi, playing dumb, then replied, "What? You just came back from the Bin province?" Li Sheng corrected Sima Yi again that he was going to the Jin province, and Sima Yi finally replied that his thoughts are escaping him and that he wished him the best in his home province. Soon, Li Sheng would take his leave and report back to Cao Shuang. Li Sheng described Sima Yi as a breath away from death, and that in his current condition, he is no longer a threat. And indeed, after 248, Cao Shuang paid little attention to Sima Yi. Then when the calendar turned to 249, the matter of ancestral worship took center stage, as Emperor Cao Rui had passed away on January 22nd, 239, and was buried 2 weeks later on February 5th. This made February 5th, 249, the 10-year anniversary of Cao Rui's burial ceremony, and by tradition, Emperor Cao Fang, Cao Rui's adopted son and heir, needed to host a large ceremony at Gaopingling, or the tomb at Gaoping, where Cao Rui was buried, to commemorate his late father. Now, Gaopingling was located roughly 10 kilometers south of the capital city of Luoyang, a fair distance outside the city limit. So Cao Shuang, who was in charge of the details of the ceremony, as he was still the regent in power, decided to do what he had always done when leaving the capital, as he would personally accompany the emperor at all times and bring all his brothers with him. This was the exact moment that Sima Yi had been waiting for. After a year and a half of pretending to be sick, behind the scenes, Sima Yi had been plotting for a coup with his family and a few senior officials at court. This group included his eldest son, Sima Shi, who is Sima Yi's heir and the future leader of the Sima clan after Sima Yi's death, Sima Yi's younger brother, Sima Fu, Grand Commandant Jiang Ji, who was an old friend of Sima Yi, Grand Excellency of the Mass, Gao Rou, who was another well-respected elder statesman and someone who could no longer tolerate Cao Shuang's corruption at court, and finally, the former minister of the imperial household, Wang Guan, who was fed up by Cao Shuang stealing imperial items for personal use, as the minister of the imperial household was the one in charge of maintaining these wares. Now, the most important member of this group was not actually Sima Yi or any of the senior court officials, but Sima Yi's eldest son, Sima Shi, who is technically still supposed to be in the final year of his 3-year stint of guarding the tomb of his mother. Sima Shi's importance goes back to when he first became the general of the Central Guards, through the political concession made between Sima Yi and Cao Shuang, where Sima Yi allowed Cao Shuang's cousin, Xia Houxuan, to become the commander of the Western forces, in exchange for letting Sima Shi take over for Xia Houxuan's former post as the general of the Central Guards, a position that Sima Shi would serve for roughly 3 years before he would resign following his mother Zhang Chunhua's death. During these 3 years, we mentioned how Sima Shi promoted strictly by merit, which earned him the loyalty of countless officers and troops, especially those from a poor background. Little did everyone know that from these troops and officers loyal to him, Sima Shi handpicked 3,000 men and trained them to become 死士, which literally means death guards, or guards who are willing to give their lives for their commander. The most impressive thing about Sima Shi's 3,000 death guards was that all of them, throughout the years, have remained quietly inside the city of Luoyang, living their life normally, whether they remained in the army or retired back to civilian life. Then all of a sudden, as Sima Yi informed his eldest son that the timing was now right, Sima Shi summoned all 3,000 death guards overnight, and they would all answer, ready to give their life on the morning of February 5th, 249. Sima Yi was exceedingly impressed by his heir, as the night before the big day, Sima Yi saw that Sima Shi slept soundly and calmly, while his second son, Sima Zhao, who was also informed of the plans the day before, tossed and turned nervously all night, unable to sleep. The next morning, as Cao Shuang and the imperial convoy left the city for their ceremony at Gaopingling, Sima Yi, along with his brother, Sima Fu, and 2 sons in Sima Shi and Sima Zhao, would take command of their 3,000 death guards, and their first target would be the weapon depot. This was the only logical choice, as aside from the troops currently on duty throughout the capital, every other piece of armor and weapon within the capital was stored here. It was so important that Cao Shuang moved his own estate right next door to it. And it just happens that Cao Shuang's estate would become the first obstacle, as around the corners of this large estate, there were guard towers constantly garrisoned by watchmen and archers. And when Sima Yi and their 3,000 death guards flooded onto the streets of Luoyang and started to approach Cao Shuang's estate, the archers on these guard towers immediately aimed their bow at Sima Yi, who was leading this group from the front. Yet before these archers would take Sima Yi's life, a captain in charge of Cao Shuang's estate, by the name of Sun Qian, gave the orders to hold fire, as he would tell these archers that the world is filled with things where the ending is yet to be determined. Now, even though it was never recorded down in history, I'm fairly sure that Sun Qian was a covert agent secretly working for the Sima clan. Whether it was through Sima Shi's previous appointments or other relationships, Sun Qian was there that day to give Sima Yi a clear path to the weapon depot. It was also never recorded whether the guards at the weapon depot resisted or not, or perhaps Sima Yi also already arranged the right men to be on duty that day. But the final result is that Sima Yi would take the weapon depot with relative ease, as now all their death guards got to equip the best armors the Kingdom of Wei had to offer. One thing you have to know about ancient China and ancient warfare is that armor is the most important piece of war equipment that has always been banned for civilians by the Chinese dynasties. Weapons, on the other hand, were usually not banned for civilians, but possessing armor was a crime punishable by death, because of how effective armor was against the weapons of the time. So with their death guards now armed to the teeth, Sima Yi will launch the second step of his plan, which was to take the Sima Gate, or the military gate of the Imperial Palace, where all the on-duty Imperial Palace guards would be stationed at. This will be no doubt a fierce and difficult fight, but once the Sima Gate was taken, the Imperial Palace would be secured. And with the Imperial Palace, Sima Yi can then ask the Empress Dowager Guo to use her Empress Dowager seal to issue edicts to the court. To complete this mission, Sima Yi would send his younger brother and his 2 sons, while he would go personally meet with the senior officials that supported his coup. Now, Sima Yi waited until taking the weapon depot before making this meeting with the other co-conspirators, because if he had failed at the weapon depot, the coup would have ended right there, with only the Sima clan taking the fall, while the co-conspirators can still remain unexposed. Now, with step 1 complete, Sima Yi needed to meet up with Grand Commandant Jiang Ji and use his connections in the military to take control of the city while the Death Guard attacked the Imperial Palace. Not long after, with the aid of the heavy armor and the ferocity of the Death Guards, the Sima Gate was taken and the Imperial Palace was shut down and cut off from the outside world as Sima Zhao rushed to see Empress Dowager Guo. He would explain the situation to her and ask her to use her seal to issue a series of edicts. First, she would strip Cao Shuang, Cao Xi, and Cao Xun of all their military commands. Grand Excellency Gao Rou would assume control of the Imperial Palace Guards, while Wang Guan would assume control of the Martial Guards. Sima Yi and Jiang Ji would take the city guards and march out to the Lloyd River crossing to block Cao Shuang in case he tried to return to Luoyang, as with so many supporters of Cao Shuang still inside, the coup was not yet successful until Cao Shuang is captured and the emperor is returned. So to find out how the coup ended and the result of the coup, come back next time as we'll wrap up our series then. Hopefully y'all have enjoyed this episode enough to consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel by leaving a comment below or by hitting that like button, as the final episode of this series will drop once we hit 400 likes on this video. So as always, I'll see you all then. Bye!